Hello and welcome to The Price of Music, brought to you by Music Ally, the show that's fascinated by all the fun and games and finances of the music world. I'm Steve Lamack, and this is a special bonus edition of the show. Thank you very much for listening. In a moment, we'll be joined by Baron Brennan. There's a first for us, an actual member of the House of Lords on the show, although Kevin Brennan isn't your typical Lord. He's a former MP who plays the guitar, once suggested that the House of Commons should consider having Dress Down Thursdays. He's also led a campaign with Billy Bragg to lift the ban on prisoners having access to guitars, and he's long been a champion of musical issues in Parliament, especially around grassroots music venues, which has led him to be given his latest role, which is that of spearheading a new fan-led review of live and electronic music on behalf of the Commons Culture Committee. Take a minute to just let that sink in and the importance of it. Yes, there is an actual fan-led review. This is a very rare chance to tell government what live music in this country really means to us and what we like about it and what we don't like and what could be done to improve matters. It's a wide-ranging survey, including subjects like ticket resale, but all the findings will help discussions at government level about the music scene in this country. It's something that we've been asking for ages, and it's currently open till the end of November. As an overview, this is what it says on the actual website. Our aim is to put fans at the heart of how the live and electronic music industry works and to make sure the government is listening to them. To tell us more, here is the man himself. Kevin, welcome to The Price of Music.
Thanks, Steve. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for giving us some of your time. At the risk of embarrassing you before we've even started, I found this quote on a website which says of you, this is from the former Long Pig singer, Crispin Hunt: Kevin Brennan is a rare and enviable thing, equally gifted as a writer of songs as he is a righter of wrongs. That's what you want on your epitaph, isn't it? That's quite the endorsement.
I haven't seen that before. I'll have to buy Crispin a drink next time I see him round it. He's a good wordsmith.
It's very nice of it. Although I guess it partly depends on whether you like the Long Pigs or not. But I've got a music question for you, because some people will already know this, but I don't know. How is your band? Because now you've moved from the Commons to the Lords. Because you had a band with some fellow MPs called brilliantly, in case you don't know, listeners, MP4.
You can see what we did there. Yes. It's a little bit, we hadn't officially sort of disbanded. We were for over 20 years, but there's only one left in the Commons now. We were basically 4 MPs when we started out, and it was a cross-party thing. We had a two Labour, an SNP keyboard player, a guy called Pete Wishart, who was in Rundrick for 18 years, so proper, music industry professional, top of the pops and everything. And we had a guy called Greg Knight, who was our drummer, Tory drummer. So we were a cross-party venture, but there's only one left after 20 years. And although we haven't completely disbanded, and we have got actually one recording in the can that's never been released. So
really?
If the clamour for another MP4 record reaches such a great height, maybe we'll drop it at some point, as they say these days.
I mean, everyone's getting back together. I mean, give it another 5 years. You could make the comeback the size of Oasis,
Yeah, I think probably we're more likely to fill one of these very small grassroots music venues than a Principality Stadium in Cardiff. But you never know. You never know.
Do you see? I mean, the reason I mention these things is that people who aren't aware of your background don't think that this, the heading up this new survey is some sort of attempt to buy credibility, because you've long and often been a voice on music industry issues in the Commons, haven't you, over the years?
Yeah, I have, and I'm too old to worry about credibility, so that doesn't really matter. But I have, and when I got in as an MP, a few things just really rankled me a little bit. One was that in the House of Parliament there was a rule at the time you couldn't actually play music anywhere. And I'm thinking this is one of the most important parts of our culture, of our economy, and so on, and you can't even feature any music in case it might disturb a meeting or something like that. And I managed to get that changed, and forming the band was helpful because it was very difficult to say, well, you guys can't play, because we were actual MPs, and then we were able to bring other people in. The other thing that I noticed really about the music industry was it was very difficult to understand sometimes what the music industry actually wanted out of
Mm,
public policy, because there
mm,
were so many different voices, ironically, in an industry that's all about harmony, or should be. There were so many different voices clamoring, and in a lot of people don't understand in government. A lot of governments really just want to know, what do you actually want? I mean, everyone wants some money, obviously, and all that sort of, but what is it that you actually want and you need to flourish and help music, continue to be a success story in the UK? And so I thought it was important to try, put some time into understanding the music industry. I actually did a fellowship with the Industry and Parliament Trust and spent, 18 days over a couple of years actually visiting all different parts of the industry, from publishers to venues to big record labels to live venues. And it was really useful to build up that expertise and then be able to try and communicate to government what the industry wants and try and get
mm.
some change.
Yeah. I mean, because we quite often hear MPs from time to time talking about music, or at least talking about the success of our music industry. I think people like to show off about Britain's pop music culture and our position on the global stage and the money that the pop music industry raises, including obviously in export terms. And is that something which is you think a genuinely held belief, or do some people latch onto this? They're saying it just for show, and in which case, how will this change matters? Your review. I suppose that's two questions, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think that over the years, a better understanding has come about for MPs and so on about how the music industry actually is genuinely a UK success story. There's only 3 countries in the world that are net exporters of music. And, it's very unusual. There's billions of pounds at stake. There's lots and lots of jobs at stake in our music industry. And that does map it to politicians, to MPs and so on, because it's their constituents. It's venues that are within their constituency. And a lot of them themselves, this generation, I mean, I'm in my 60s now, Steve, but, this generation of people who actually grew up, if you like, being massive music fans and fans of, rock, pop music, all the other different genres, are the policymakers. So there is more of an understanding of its importance. And the survey we're doing here is really triggered by the fact that organizations like the Music Venues Trust and so on have pointed out what's happening in our communities to some of our grassroots music venues closing down at a fast rate. Why is that happening? What are the causes of it? Are some of the reasons that's happening public policy reasons, like the rates, or, the local council's noise abatement department, or whatever it is? What are the real causes of that? And are there other ways, are there other issues that are going on that mean that, small music venues are closing down? Do people not want to go to them anymore? I mean, you have to, you and I probably, I think I heard you say this yourself once, Steve, if we went to a gig when we were youngsters and you saw anyone over the age of 30, you'd say, what are you doing to your granddad? I think that's a direct
Yeah.
quote from you. I've used it, and it's so true. You
Yeah.
go to gigs these days and you'll see people, from all sorts of different age groups. But do younger people today actually want to go to the kind of venues that we used to love to go down a staircase onto a sticky floor into a, sweaty
Mm.
room and see a band jumping up and down? And so we're all about trying to find that out and seeing what we can do to turn the dial in favor of the fans to try and, keep this wonderful live sector we have going in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably worth just sort of mentioning the history of how this review came about, because it was originally a recommendation from the Select Committee on Grassroots Music, wasn't it? It was dismissed by government at the time, but in the end, the committee have come back to it and said, no, we think that we can get something really valuable out of it. Why don't we do it anyway?
Yeah, exactly. And I think probably the government might have been a little bit sort of weary, having done the football fan leg review, which some of this idea came from. There were all these terrible things in football with, owners changing the colours of football kits, as they did to my home team in Cardiff, and all dodgy money coming into the game, and et cetera, et cetera. And we've seen fans in football stand up together, and actually work together to try and change things. And now there's a football regulator, for example, who has just been set up, which will have powers to do something about some of these issues where you have these terrible owners in football clubs and speak on behalf of the fan. I know I'm not necessarily saying we need a music regulator or something like that in music, but I do think that there is a case to for government to listen more closely to the fans' voice. So the select committee decided, well, if the government's not going to do it, why don't we do it ourselves? They asked me. I used to be a member of that committee when I was an MP for a period of time. And when I was on that committee, I drove a lot of the inquiries the committee did around music. We did a quite impactful study on the economics of music streaming, which has turned the dial, brought about change. And you ended up with things now, like, for example, where, there's now a per diem, a daily payment for songwriters if they're asked by a major record label to, work with somebody on writing some new songs, rather than just have to depend on that song being a big hit to get any money at all. Little basic changes like that can make a big difference to people, particularly at the bottom of the music industry, or people who are not making the millions and billions of pounds that some are. So I think the committee thought it'd be worth doing. And when it's concluded, the report, which will be in the new year, it'll be presented to the committee first, of course, and then they will present it to the government. And the thing is, the government does have to respond to a select committee of the House of Commons. Can't guarantee they'll do everything we want. And not everything will be to do with government either. There might be some recommendations that are more to do with industry. But that'll be the procedure. So the survey itself, we'll close probably the end of November, I think. And then sometime in the new year, we'll come out with a report.
And how is it formulated? Because I doubt it's as easy as some people think, writing the right sort of questions that generate the most informative answers. Does that make sense? And obviously, even before that, I guess someone somewhere has to sit down and decide what the scope of it's going to be, because it could be 5 pages long, or it could be 100 pages long, depending on what sort of topics you want to cover.
Yeah, and a lot of that, comes down to my responsibility, really, to try and produce something that is, easy enough to understand, digestible, but not superficial, I suppose, at the end is the sort of thing you want to produce. And in my own mind, it seems to me, looking at it from the beginning, you think, what sort of thing will we land with? I'm hoping we might be able to come back with almost a sort of fans charter, a Hippocratic oath, if you like, of live music, something where we should say everybody involved in the live music sector, from the small venues to the big promoters, to the huge artists, to everybody should be able to agree that this is a set of values we ought to be working to when we're dealing with fans. We shouldn't be treating them as an afterthought when they are actually the heart and soul and the very reason. You can have a live music event. It's no good if no fans turn up and people don't come along. It's not a live music event. It's not a gig. And it seems to me very often that fans are almost considered as a sort of unnecessary requirement for a gig, rather than the actual essential ingredient, for a good gig. And that goes from everything from accessibility to gigs, to ticketing and the way that, ticketing is undertaken, for the transport to and from, events. All those sorts of things seem to be sometimes a complete afterthought when someone's putting on a gig. And everyone ought to be really able to agree, we're not going to rip off the fans, but actually very often that is not the case, as we know. And I think some of the early returns I've seen from the survey we've put out, some of the questions, suggest that a lot of people are concerned about ticket prices. That's not surprised, I suppose. We're all concerned about prices and so on. But they're also concerned about, the hidden parts of ticket prices, the add-ons, the booking fees, and all those sorts of things. They're very supportive, actually, Steve, of so far of the add-on that's the levy, which the new Live levy, which I know you're involved with Live, the new charity that is there to administer that levy to help support grassroots music venues and so on. But they're very suspicious of things like booking fees. Where do they go? And transparency, for the fan, I think, is a really important thing. And I'm hoping to try and get as much buy-in as possible from people to say, we will, adhere to this set of values when we're dealing with fans.
Yeah, it does. There's so much to pick up from that answer, including the fact that when you get to this part in the survey, I'll be shocked if more than 4 people, however many thousands of people answer this survey, I would be stunned if more than, say, 4 people, when it comes to the question about, do you think, how happy are you with print at home costs? Because there's a whole list of these are the costs added to your ticket, as you say.
Yeah.
There's the contribution to grassroots venues. There's the the standard booking fee, which I think most of us are sort of resigned to now. But the idea of I'm having to pay to print this out at home. If more than 4 people say, "Yep, absolutely at home with that, absolutely fine with that," I will be amazed. But there is, I mean, what you were just saying, which was one of the things which struck me actually as I went through the survey, is it does almost take you on the whole journey of a gig, because it talks about buying the ticket, different aspects of buying the ticket, and it talks about which sort of venues you go to, which ones you like. But as you say, also says, how easy is it to get to, and what's the public transport like, and how safe do you actually feel late at night on a bus, if there's a bus, which I think is going to create quite a picture, isn't it? Quite a detailed picture of what the good things are and what the stumbling blocks might be.
Yes, and a lot of those things are quite practical things too. They're not airy fairy concepts, and so they're very practical things, and it very strongly comes back from the fans that these are things they're concerned about. Now you've got this whole movement, it seems to be around the country, the Music Cities movement, where local authorities are saying we want to be thought of as a music city. Here in Cardiff, where I live, but Liverpool, Manchester, all these sorts of Glasgow, all these places, they badge themselves. We are music cities. We want to be known for having a really great music scene in our city. Okay, that's fine. But if you can't get a bus home at the end of the gig because there's no buses after 10 o'clock, or if the train stops running, and yet the gig's not ending till 11 o'clock or something like that, then how can you badge yourself as a music city? And similarly, if you're having big events and a local authority council is working with a big promoter, Live Nation or somebody like that, about putting an event on, if the accessibility is not accepted, if you're disabled, you can't go to the event, you've not got very good accessibility. If people are getting ripped off in the ticketing process by fees, printed home fees and things that, really are just basically a shakedown of the fan rather than an actual genuine cost to the business, then the local authority, it seems to me, are in a good position to say, well, we're badging ourselves as a music city. That must represent certain values as well.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, we're going to insist that the buses run, on time late at night that people can get home. We're going to insist that the promoters adhere to certain standards and treat fans in a certain way. And in that way, I think, there's an actual lever there with which we can try and help move things on a bit, because the local council is actually involved in wanting to have a successful local music industry. And they themselves, shouldn't be, allowing people to open up next to a venue, some residential thing next to an existing venue, and then try and shut the venue down for making noise. That sort of thing is the sort of thing that local councils can have some influence over.
Yeah. It's interesting how much of this is interlinked as well, don't you think? This is going off at a slight tangent, but in terms of being able to get to a gig on public transport, in this day and age where we're finding tours are half the length of what they were 30 years ago, and there are certain towns which are now appear to be less utilised by booking agents or bands. So certain towns are getting bypassed. So the people in that town then have to get on a bus or a train to go to the next town where there are still gigs. So we're creating more of an audience that has to move around. And it's that audience where, if you used to have a venue in Bath Moles, if Bath Moles shuts, then everyone in Bath has got to get on a train to Bristol, and there's got to be a train late enough home from Bristol.
Exactly.
Otherwise you're scuppered, aren't you?
Exactly. I mean, as I say, Cardiff is there's a lot of concentration of gigs in cities these days. It's true, and towns and places are definitely losing out. But if that is going to happen, you've got to have those public transport links, and they've all got to to work for people to be able to travel. But secondly, we also need to think about why is that happening, and what can we do perhaps to try and re-energize and reinvigorate what's going on in some of these smaller, towns and cities that are losing out. And I was thinking about this the other day and talking to some people. Interesting thing about the music industry, I think, is how, in some ways, there isn't such a direct connection in the music industry between who you support, the band you support, the artist you want to go and see sometimes, and the fan. In football, you're a Cardiff City supporter, you're a Liverpool supporter, whatever it is, and there's a very sort of direct connection. In music, there's there are certain barriers between the fan and the artist that they love and that they support, whether that barrier is the promoter of the gig, or whether that barrier is the ticket platform, or whether that barrier is the record label themselves or the management and so on. I think with all the technology we have these days, there must be loads of fans out there who, if they were connected to more directly with the artists, and were, and there was a continuing dialogue going on, that if that artist actually then put on a gig in their little town, they'd actually find they did have an audience there that was, would come and see them. But somehow or other, it seems to me in the music industry, and people said this to me, that the music industry always seems to put up some little layer of a barrier between the fan and the artist themselves.
It's interesting. I hadn't thought about that really. I wonder whether we transfer, our love maybe from the band, or the football club, from the band to maybe actually just the place, the venue, that you will support Bedford Esquires like you would support your local football team more than maybe the away teams who are the bands who are on tour. I don't know. Maybe that's a reasonable analogy.
I think there's a lot of truth in that as well. Yeah, I think people do really love and support particular venues. But I still think that, making that direct connection between the artist and the fan is something that we could encourage. And there are sort of people out there who are trying to build those sorts of alliances now to make sure that fans have a more direct connection, and that their experience when they go and buy a ticket isn't as awful as it seems to be for lots of people from their responses to the survey.
Another thing which is obviously very relevant, which is included in the survey, is the resale of tickets and what can be done to make that a better experience for fans, because there is an ongoing debate, isn't there, behind the scenes at the moment, where we're expecting some announcement of this survey into ticket resale, but that's a big subject at the moment, obviously coming off the back of big shows like the Oasis gigs, but I imagine that's going to be a very big issue once you get to the end of this.
Yeah, it will be. I mean, interestingly, I think the Oasis tour thing was really interesting, I think, and has actually, I think, caused a little bit of a reset in the live industry, because we were on a pathway, I think, towards a situation that is quite common in America in particular, towards this idea of surge pricing, in ticketing, and this idea, like, when you get on an airplane, you buy your ticket a couple of months in advance, it might be one price, but as you get closer to the flight itself, the price goes up as the demand and supply vary. And so you might be sat next to someone on an airplane and you paid a completely different price for the ticket for the seat. I think there seems to be a kind of visceral hatred for that idea for a gig amongst people. And I think it's partly to do with the fact that the gig is more of a communal experience than a flight, really, isn't it? You're not there to sort of have a religious kind of epiphany when you catch on a flight. You're just trying to get from A to B and hopefully do so in reasonable comfort. But a gig is a completely different thing. So people really respond very badly to that idea. And the interesting thing was, of course, Ticketmaster were accused of surge pricing during the Oasis gig sale. In fact, what was going on was something rather different, and the Competition and Markets Authority had looked into it. They're actually admitting people into the ticket sale, saying the price of the ticket is whatever, 100 quid. And then saying, as you go on, say, whoops, we run out of 100 quid tickets, but we can give you a ticket for 150 quid. But it was exactly the same ticket, really. They just, dressed it up in a different way. They say, that's not surge pricing. There were only ever that number of tickets available at 100 quid, so it's not really surge pricing. But the point is, when you went into that sale, you didn't know that was going to happen.
Mm.
And that's the point. You need transparency and clarity. That's what fans want, out of the situation. I think it's invidious to sell the same ticket at two different prices, the same sort of seated or place in the gig at the two different prices. And it's certainly invidious to put smoke and mirrors around it and trying to pretend, to the fan it's something that it actually isn't. The other issue you were mentioning, sorry, it's a long answer, Steve, but there's loads in this, isn't it? Is more the secondary ticketing thing when you buy a ticket for resale. And the government has said, and they haven't announced the details of it, has said that it does intend already to act to restrict, ticket resale and not have a free-for-all, like you see tickets on Viagogo advertised for, £1,000 and all that sort of thing. Not have a free-for-all, but have a properly regulated secondary ticket market where if there is a markup in the price, it would be a reasonable one to cover any costs or whatever, but not sort of an outrageous bit of just ripping fans off. So it'll be interesting to see the details of that proposals. Certainly when the survey comes out, we'll see where the government got to by then, but I'm sure this survey and the report following it will have something to say on that subject as well.
When you do finally try to make sense of the findings, what are you hoping that you'll see? Are you looking for general trends or answers to specific questions, or a mixture of the two?
Yeah, I think it is a mixture of the two. There are very, very particular things that people are concerned about, but there are also more general trends that are going on in around live music and gigs and so on. As I said, I'm hoping that what will be clear are the sorts of things that we ought to be able to get. And I know this is probably possibly idealistic, but we ought to be able to get, everybody in the industry to buy into the notion that fans should be treated fairly. I accept it's a business. People have got to make money out of it. The promoters need to take their cut. The venue needs their cut. The artist should be paid. Creator remuneration is my whole thing. I want musicians actually to get paid, out of all this. And I think fans, unless, they're a sort of leftover from the free festival movement or something, they understand you've got to pay, and it's right that you should pay, and it's right that musicians should get rewarded for their labor, as often they're the only person in the room who doesn't get paid when you go to an event or something. Is the actual musician. When the bar staff's getting paid, the cleaners are getting paid, the doorman's getting paid, but you say, would you play for free? I've always thought that's crazy. It is labor when you make music. But I would have thought that, everybody could agree that that's fair enough. But what shouldn't be happening in all of that is that you're hiding things from the fans. And, when we were talking earlier on about the booking fees thing, I think I've asked people this question, and I don't think I've ever come across anybody who's just a music fan who actually knows the answer to it, which is, where do you think the money goes on all these additional fees? What do you think it pays for? And people genuinely don't know. Some of them think, does it go, on paying for the platform that the ticket is being advertised on and being sold through? Mm-hmm. Yeah, in part, some of it might go to that. But where else does it go? A lot of people don't realize that actually, in some instances, a chunk of that booking fee will be going to the artists themselves. Meanwhile, the artist will be there, saying, it's outrageous ticket prices. I'm going to keep the ticket prices down at our gigs. And yet, round the other side, as the customers on their way out the website and bought the ticket and they're getting shaken down, one of the people shaking them down is the artists themselves who's taking a third of the booking fee or something like that. So transparency, clarity, treating people fairly and not just treating them as an opportunity to shake them down, I think is something fans really, really are hankering after.
And this obviously crucially, once the scores are in, it's then I wonder how much pressure there is going to be on, well, I guess yourself, everyone who's involved in it, in making sure that this does translate into some conversations at government. Otherwise, the more cynical of your music fan will go, look, you see, we did this, we told them what we thought, and they didn't do anything about it. So something's going to happen,
Yeah.
or at least be discussed, doesn't it, at the end of this? And this is why, I encourage everyone to fill this in, because the more people that do, the more powerful it becomes as a piece of data. But then at the other end of it, someone's got to go, crikey, there's
Yeah.
there's a real appetite from the fans themselves. They do actually want to have their voices heard. We're going to have to do something about this.
Yeah. I mean, when we did the music streaming report a few years back, I mean, I would have liked to have seen much more radical change coming out of that than actually happened. But, sometimes in politics, you you can't always get what you want, to quote the old song, but get what you need sometimes. But in the music streaming thing, not every recommendation we made in that report was implemented. I actually tried to change the law through a private members bill to improve payouts on copyright for, under copyright law for streaming to artists. But what did happen was a whole series of working groups were set up within the part of government that's called the Intellectual Property Office, which is really the organization that's there to make sure that people who own a copyright on something like a song, for example, actually get paid out. And that's only exists because the law says they should get paid out. It doesn't exist in nature itself.
Mm.
And lots of groups were set up, and there's been huge improvements, for example, in the transparency of the data that people like Spotify have, that ensures people get paid. There's been this this committee set up about remuneration, which is still working, but it's already produced this songwriters payment, which I was talking about earlier. So things happen, and it's about turning the dial basically, and turning that dial in the direction of the fan. And I'm very confident that the government will actually listen to what we have to say. And I'm hoping I can make recommendations that are not, out with the fairies recommendations, but are recommendations that are practical, that national government, local government, and the industry itself can get on board with.
And as well, obviously, the survey's up online. I imagine since you've been in post doing this, you've been out talking to people around the country as well, just trying to get a feel for what fans think.
Yes, I have. And I mean, last week I was down at, near my home patch, down at the Soon Festival, speaking there on a panel in Cardiff. Been over to the Output event over in Belfast as well, which was really interesting to get perspective. A really vibrant music scene in Belfast. It's fantastic to see what's going on there. I'm also due to get out to Glasgow and to Manchester in the coming weeks. Also doing something at the Ministry of Sound in London. You want to make sure we're getting that perspective as well, and not just the perspective of small grassroots music venues, but also it's a wider nightlife, including clubs and electronic music and so on. And all of that's good. Another thing that's being done by the clerks who work for the committee with the survey is, and I think it's the first time Parliament's ever done this, because we're not always at the cutting edge of things, and this isn't exactly cutting edge. But the trouble with social media is, it's an actual toxic cesspit sometimes these days, isn't it? And you put anything on there about politics, and all you'll just get is abuse from bots from Russia or somewhere like that. But there is underneath that actually groups of people on social media who are really interested in live music and want to have their say. And if you go on things like Reddit and you look into some of these subgroups on Reddit, there are people who are just who are discussing their live music experiences. And so we've managed to get in touch with those groups and had really good level of response. The clerks in the committee have been really encouraged by the fact that you go there and what you get back is, we'd like to have our voice heard in this. And they've been getting a response rate. They're expecting you expect maybe a 5% response rate when you put a survey out. They've been getting like 30% and things like that on these groups. So we're trying to find other ways of engaging with people, than just putting the survey up online. And we've also distributed around the country to different groups who are interested, a sort of do-it-yourself kind of event thing which they can put on. So I'm hoping some of them bear some fruit as well. So we'll have to wait and see.
And I mean, just going back to something just before we let you go from earlier on in the conversation, talking about grassroots and our love of grassroots venues, and I guess you've seen how difficult it is for a lot of small venues at the moment. It's not an easy or comfortable time, is it, for venues with smaller capacities? So, I mean,
Yeah.
out of these conversations, we hope to find some ways of helping them out, or finding ways where they can help themselves. Maybe some of those venues will learn that they've got audiences that maybe don't go, that could go.
Absolutely. And part of what I was talking about was about more direct connection with the fans. Actually, venues themselves, small venues, a lot of them are very good at it. There's some great work being done by people like the Music Venues Trust and the Independent Venues Community Group, who try to encourage venues to do other things during the day, and have community events and get people used to going in to the building and feeling that it's a place they can go to, even if they've never been to a gig there before. Things like that can be very, very useful. So all of that is tremendously important, and I'm hoping that this can be part of it. I'm doing an event actually in a place called Le Pub in Newport, which is a great venue, which actually now is owned through the work with the Music Venues Trust. Is actually owned, the freehold is owned by the community themselves. Because often small venues are in a perilous position because once the lease runs out, along comes someone else and says, "Oh, I'd rather put a shoe shop in there or something," and a well-loved local venue is gone. So encouraging those sorts of initiatives are really important as well.
Is that your favourite? Is my final question. Is that your favourite grassroots venue? Have you got a favourite grassroots venue? If you say the Forum in Tunbridge Wells, I'll know that Mark David from the Music Venue Trust has bribed you before coming on. Do you have a favourite grassroots venue?
I've never been to. He tried to entice me to go there. I think it's in an old public toilet, isn't it, or something?
It is.
Am I wrong or right about that?
No,
He's trying to entice me to go along and perform when he's on his sort of Bowie tribute night or whatever they have there. But my favourite grassroots venue is a little converted old chapel in a place called Penturk on the hill just outside Cardiff. It's run by a guy called Howell Wigley, he's just got a tremendously winning formula there. And I know this is an anathema to some people, and we haven't mentioned this before, but there is a phenomenon known as tribute bands out there that some people scoff at, but they do keep quite a lot of musicians getting paid so they can do their other bands and things that they really want to do. So I never scoff at anything that means that someone gets paid for playing music live. But he seems to have got a winning formula there, where the lovely venue, people want to go there. You go there early. If you go there an hour before the gig, you have a lovely pizza, which they provide there. He's got a lovely mixture of different programming there. So yeah, you get the tribute bands, which bring a bit of money in, but also you get independent artists who are coming on and performing. I went to see I've been to quite a few gigs there recently. I went to see Cara Dillon, a folk artist, a couple of weeks ago there, and she's from Derry in Northern Ireland originally. And she said something, everyone, artists always at gigs, they always say, well, thank you for coming out this evening. Without the fans, there wouldn't be a gig, and you made the effort to come out. And then she said in a lovely Irish accent, "Now, sure, what else would you be doing?" And I think that's the way I'm feeling. Actually, people, what else would you be doing? They're coming out and going to a gig. What? Just get out there and do it. And I thought that was lovely. But it's a super venue. It's called Acapella, the venue, and it's just outside Cardiff. And if you ever get the chance, you got to go.
Excellent. It's been lovely talking to you, Kevin. Thank you for your time. Good luck with the survey, which you can find on the government website. If you go to the Culture, Media and Sport Committee page, then click on fan-led survey. That'll get you there. We'll also put a link at the bottom of this. And yes, thanks again for taking time to listen, everybody. Do go and fill this in. It really will, I think, hopefully help shape how live music is perceived. It's down to us. We're the people. Instead of moaning about stuff in the pub or at the back of the gig, this is the chance. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Thanks very much to Kevin Brennan, our guest. Thanks for listening to this extra edition of The Price of Music. We'll be back with another regular show next week. Till then, take care, everyone. Cheerio.